Welcome to School of Pop, where curiosity meets pop culture. I'm Kat Monroe, your host and study buddy in all things entertainment. And this semester, we're exploring the ethics of being a fan. This episode is a big one. It's our penultimate episode of the semester, and we're covering a lot. I know I couldn't do a whole season about fandom ethics and not touch on these last few topics, so today's solo episode is a reflection on three big ideas: cancel culture, projection, and entitlement. These are heavy, tricky, sometimes touchy subjects, and while I'm bringing in some things that we've already learned this season, especially from our recent guests, I'm also going to be sharing my own opinions and observations along the way. Think of this episode as a final study guide of sorts before our finale, so let's jump in. When cancel culture first started, it was during an era where celebrities felt so accessible on the internet. Social media was fresh and new, and they were just as excited to be on it. There was just a lot of seeing celebrities trying to be seen as relatable to their fans. If you canceled them, they heard it. But now, artists have retreated back into their shells, rarely touching social media or having their accounts be completely managed by someone else. There are some outliers there, of course. We see some of that, sometimes rants and stuff. But a lot of these celebrities have pulled back. It's a completely different vibe on social media if you're following celebrities now compared to maybe 2013 to like 2016. And a big part of this has to do with cancel culture and just the general fear of misspeaking their way to the end of their career, or just a bunch of internet hate coming their way. Everything is much more curated, more protected, and more distant to be as careful as possible. But with this being known that many celebrities are more unreachable on the internet than ever, can we talk about whether cancel culture even works now? To start by answering that question, I think it feels silly to even say cancel culture in the year of 2025 because I don't even think we are seeing people try to cancel celebrities as much anymore. Like, we've entered a whole new era, more of accountability culture, I would say. People aren't necessarily always trying to end someone's career, but to see them take responsibility for the fact that they made a mistake and own up to it. Maybe face some sort of consequence, or even if it's just speaking out on an important subject, they want them to be accountable on being knowledgeable about something. But I think accountability culture, at least, it leaves room for the fact that even celebrities are imperfect human beings, and maybe they can show change with the right feedback. But again, let's discuss cancel culture or accountability. Do we think it works? With celebrities, I think cancel culture is driven by a pseudo sense of power from the fans, like the belief that they're in control, like we pay their bills, essentially. We got them famous. In a lot of situations, we start their career, and then that leads to this idea that we can end them too. But the thing is, it's a lot harder to stop with what you start with celebrities, because if they're really notable, that cancellation has to be super widespread in order for it to have any real sense of it working. I think people want celebrities to be accountable for their mistakes, and that's understandable. But if someone isn't even online to see it and their team carefully curates their presence, how much of that accountability is actually real, and how much of it is just a performance? Is a celebrity really understanding the concerns, or just saying what needs to be said to keep fans present? And how much of it is actually changing how celebrities are perceived and their success in the real world versus just being internet noise? And I think these are the issues that I personally have with the whole concept of accountability culture and cancel culture. Not only that, but I also just think there tends to be a sense of selective outrage as it relates to cancel culture and just celebrities on the internet. I mean, the way the public reacts, especially on the internet regarding a controversial issue, depends on the person who says it or the people who are impacted by it. And I think people really pick and choose with who they find a problem with doing certain things, whether that be because the artist has like a very rabid fan base that makes up excuses for anything that artist does, or whether it's just like an extreme case of something versus something people are more willing to give a pass on. I think the times when cancel culture works usually is when it has to do with one of three things, and maybe a little bit more than this, but these are like the first things that come to mind, and that's really just criminal behavior. And I'm talking about like in jail for like battery or sexual assault or something like very crazy, which at that point their career is over, obviously. I would say the other things is usually like things like homophobia and racism, but only sometimes because I have seen plenty of artists get away with racism, especially unfortunately. So you can't even say that. That's again going in line with like the picking and choosing that I see a lot of the time. But anything else, it seems to be an internet issue. And the bigger the artist, I feel like the less that it matters. A lot of things that hypothetically have canceled an artist, you could go out into the real world and bring it up, and the general public will either not know what you're talking about or not care. People have tried to cancel Taylor Swift a million times, for example. And I mean, one of the most notable hashtags that kind of were at the launch of cancel culture really being big on the internet, hashtag Taylor Swift is over party, that began in reference to her, and yet she's still the biggest pop star out there today. A testament to the idea that cancel culture doesn't truly work like that all the time. And again, I think fans do realize that cancel culture does not work in this way because I think the narrative has, again, it's changed from they're canceled to they need to be held accountable or they need to be educated. I think there can, however, still be some flaws with how fans can handle this idea of holding their favorite artist accountable, in my own opinion. Of course, like I said, some of this is just my opinion. And I'll say, like, I personally believe in what I'm going to call quiet cancel culture. What it essentially means is I understand and recognize that I have power in myself as a fan in terms of my own actions, and I understand that I probably cannot change a celebrity. So I cancel them in my mind. If there is something they do, and I mean, it's not like no little Twitter drama or anything small. I'm talking things that go literally against my own personal values. I don't expect everyone to conform to being who I want them to be or to have the same opinions or political wants in the world or whatever is me, but I can still choose to decide where I want to give my money or time and whether I want to give it to someone who doesn't align with my personal values. So instead of trending hashtags or commenting on every post, I just make the personal decision to pull back. And if I change my mind later or they show some redeeming quality, I may return. But at the end of the day, being a fan is about support. Like, I understand there's all these weird power dynamics between celebrities and how they put themselves up on these pedestals, and there's a big class divide and stuff. But literally, do not forget that you as a fan are in control. You may not be able to control the person, but you can just leave. Like, you can just stop paying them attention, unfollow, stop streaming, don't go to the tour. Instead of making yourself so vulnerable and begging for someone you have no personal relationship with to change. I mean, to each their own on that, but that's like how I view it. If it's really something that I'm like not vibing with, I'm not even going to give them the time to be like hashtag or trending or being on Twitter to even care that much. Like, even that piece of my time is sacred. Like, that's me. Like, there are artists that I listen to that I don't know if like is the right word, but I'll just say I listen to their music and that's it. Like, celebrities overshare sometimes. Sometimes I just don't want to know. Like, remember that era where everyone was talking about not showering? Like, that era where celebrities were just giving their unsolicited hygiene habits, stuff like that. There are artists whose story I enjoy, who I'm inspired by, who I like hearing about outside of just their work. And then there are some where I just separate completely and just enjoy the music. To me, that's what separating the art from the artist is. But for me, that line is like, do I just not like their vibe, or like, are they a racist? And if I just don't like their vibe, then yeah, separate art from the artist. But if they're like a terrible person, then I'm not going to support someone who doesn't align with my values. And I'm not going to like force that on anybody else, but like, I know that it's my time and my money, so I'm not going to do it. And speaking to that a little more, even as it relates to flaws, I think fans also can project and view celebrities to be on a pedestal as well. And honestly, I feel like this is a system I have seen my entire life. I'm like thinking back to like the prime Disney Channel era, where if a child star made a mistake or did drugs, it was the end of the world. Like, these kids were built up as a moral role models before they even had a chance to grow into themselves. And so I think it's a pattern that's even beyond us. Like, it's a pattern that is like forced when you're even just a child, and then you just grow up into it. So it's really something worth talking about and looking at. It's okay to be inspired by someone, but the moment you treat them like they have to be perfect, you leave a lot of room to be disappointed. Even the wholesome, quote unquote, ones, like, For example, I feel like if something bad came out about Keanu Reeves, I think the entire world would end. If Hosier turned out to be problematic, I think the internet would spontaneously combust. And I mean, I'm saying that about them because those are two male celebrities that I feel like people project this man who can do no wrong energy onto them. Like, I just feel like there are so many celebrities that people just put on such high standards for. It's kind of like when a famous couple breaks up after they've been dating for a long time and people online are like, love isn't real now because they didn't work out. And it's like, calm down, you guys. When fans project their identities onto artists, whether it be morally, emotionally, creatively, they're not just consuming music, they're trying to write the script. And the moment the artist stops playing the role they imagined, it's over. And that's an issue because, again, these are still human beings capable of making mistakes, even if the curated brand image they're selling you seems to be of one that can do no wrong. What's also interesting to me, again, is how selective cancel culture is. Like, who gets the pass? Who gets to stay? I think a lot of cancel culture is just people using morality to justify dislike. I'll use Taylor Swift for an example because she's an obvious example. She's who I probably see it with the most online. Some people just do not like her, and that's fine. But I've noticed, especially online, people feel like they need a moral reason to not like her. If the only time you care about environmental issues is when you're criticizing Taylor Swift for her carbon emissions, but you're silent about other celebrities with the same habits, it raises the question, is it about environmental activism or just an opportunity to jump on a popular target? I'm not trying to sit here and defend Taylor Swift. If you want to criticize her for how she uses her plane, by all means, go ahead. I think that's fair. She does have high emissions, but there's also a lot of other musicians on that list who do not get named ever and get a pass in those conversations, like Travis Scott, Beyonce, Jay-Z, Celine Dion, Blake Shelton, but it's only Taylor Swift and her emissions. And it's like, at that point, it just feels like people are just using morality to justify dislike. It's great to care about the environment, it really is, but if you only care about it through the lens of hating on an artist you don't like, that just doesn't seem healthy to me. You can just dislike an artist. There doesn't have to be an official moral reason. Taylor Swift, she can just annoy you, or you can hate her voice or not relate to her music or whatever. I feel like it's just a little bit weird to pretend to care about something just so that you can say so. I don't feel like you need an excuse. And so the performative activism that comes within cancel culture has always been something that's just a little bit weird to me. This using of cancel culture to be a beacon of hate towards artists you don't like also comes with another issue too that's not always talked about, and that's misinformation. Whether it's photoshopping a social media comment as a joke to make someone look bad or coming up with a completely fake narrative, it's also inherently harmful behavior. People share fake tweets, edit screenshots, use AI to make it seem like someone said something they didn't. And worse, they dox people over things. They send death threats. They harass families. And it doesn't just happen to celebrities, it happens to fans too. Whether somebody says something unpopular about an artist and suddenly they're being stalked or threatened, like, that's cruel. That's not normal. And I think the scariest part is how common it's become. Like, people will send death threats to a stranger over a tweet about an artist just because they didn't like a song or they didn't agree with something that was said. And I just think like that's not normal. That's crazy. So those are my big issues, I'd say, with the whole world of cancel culture. One last thought before we close out this part of our episode, and it kind of ties into what we talked about last lesson with competitive fans and how important the community aspect of fandom is, because I think it has a huge impact on cancel culture too. Earlier, I mentioned that my take is to do quiet cancel culture. It's just what I'm comfortable with and it's what's easiest for me. But I do think, too, that for other people, cancel culture has to be a huge thing because sometimes it's not just about the artist, it's about the community. And that's what we talked about, is how important fandom is with community and just like identity and that sense of belonging. I mean, people make friendships through fandom. It's the excitement of being part of something. And so when you're canceling somebody and you're stepping away and you're like, I'm not going to support them, you often see people trying to bring people with them, you know. If you're still following this artist, I'm unfollowing you. You all need to stop following them too. You need to stop supporting this artist and stuff like that you see on Twitter. And it's like, I think it's because walking away from the community is even harder. So you want to take people with you. And so sometimes instead of letting go, people fight to demand that change. They try to hold the artist accountable, push for apologies, demand better behavior, because if the artist changes, then they don't have to lose the connections that they made through the artist either. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I mean, some fans should speak up and advocate for better, but I think it's also worth acknowledging that sometimes cancel culture isn't just about accountability. It's about trying to hold on to something that feels too important to lose. For so many fans, especially those from marginalized communities, celebrities aren't just entertainers. They feel like safe spaces, like someone who gets them, and that's a very slippery slope to be on. And I think that's a part of why cancel culture feels so intense, especially in fandom spaces. Because in a real relationship, if someone does something that doesn't align with your values, you have options. You can talk to them, explain your perspective, maybe even see them grow or change. You might even get closure. But with a celebrity, you'll never have that. You can't sit down and have a conversation with them. You can't get a direct answer or know if they really heard you. Even if they put out an apology, it's carefully scripted, it's carefully curated, it's not real. And I think that can be even more frustrating for fans because the relationship, it might still feel personal, but the power dynamic is completely one-sided. So fans do the only thing they can do. They try to force that change from the outside, whether that's through backlash, trending hashtags, demanding apologies, and sometimes that push leads to accountability. Other times it turns into an exhausting cycle where fans are trying to make something happen that they'll never actually get closure on. And so again, I want to end on this idea that fans are always in control. Just because you like a celebrity doesn't mean you don't have full autonomy over your own opinions or choices. I don't believe in any sort of idea that fans owe unconditional loyalty to their favorite artist or celebrity. Fans do not owe anything to celebrities beyond basic decency. Fans are consumers. You are in control of what you buy into. You can stop supporting the artist financially if you dislike something they've done. Maybe they will still have a career if there's not a massive movement behind you, but at least you know you stood on your own morals and aren't contributing to that person's success anymore. And sometimes that's all you can do. Okay, so we've talked about cancel culture and what happens when fans try to end artists, but what about when we try to rewrite them or make a set list just for us or drop an album whenever we say go? It's time to talk about projection and entitlement in fan spaces. And this is a very loaded subject, of course, and really I'm probably going to be just scratching the surface today, but again, the ideas are too important to not at least briefly explore in this semester on fandom ethics. So when I say projection, I'm referring to the idea of how fans project their expectations, opinions, and theories onto artists, sometimes to the point of completely rewriting who that person actually is. This can show up as over-theorizing, weaponizing lyrics, demanding constant emotional output, and even leading to real-world harm. In fact, the first example of projection, we've already touched on it earlier, and that's cancel culture. Sometimes fans are actually projecting an idealized version of who they want an artist to be, and when that person fails to meet those expectations, they're canceled. It's less about what someone actually did and more about a feeling of betrayal, of disappointment that they didn't match the character fans had created in their heads. But projection can go beyond that, so I want to talk about some of the other ways that fans can project. First up is the over-theorizing and speculating. Fans can often create narratives about artists based on limited evidence, often with damaging consequences. For example, many of you probably have heard of Larry Stylinson and those theories, where people believed that Harry Styles and Louis Tomlinson were actively in a relationship, despite Louis repeatedly denying it, having a child that they claimed was a doll being pushed around in a stroller. Just crazy stuff. And it's not harmless speculation. Louis has repeatedly said it's affected his real life relationships. That's very invasive. Another good example would be how fans have all these running theories about Olivia Rodrigo and Taylor Swift and whether they had a falling out. We see stuff like this all the time where speculation snowballs into perceived conflict, even where none may have existed. And I think all this points back to kind of what I was discussing in our parasocial relationships episode, because it's fun to theorize. It really is. And I say this for me as someone that loves film and TV. It's fun to make theories about what's happening in the Marvel movies or when you're watching a mystery show like The White Lotus. But it's just not right to theorize about the personal lives of real people. Because as I mentioned in that parasocial relationships episode, I do kind of view celebrities kind of like fictional characters too. I know we aren't seeing the real them. We aren't seeing the real Taylor Swift or the real Olivia Rodrigo. We are getting Olivia Rodrigo, the brand, you know? So I think that when fans start theorizing and projecting about people, though, they're interacting with the brand, but they're crossing the line that isn't all that solid, and they're messing with the real person underneath all of that. It's like people theorize about their favorite artist the same way they do their favorite fictional character on a television show, except there's an additional line there because there's still a real person behind that. And I think that's why it's so important for fans to avoid doing that. Even on reality TV, which pretends to show us the real person, we're still only seeing a version shaped by editing and narrative. And people tend to forget that. I mean, look at all the backlash the latest Love Island cast got. I mean, it's really crazy. The audience treats these people like characters and forgets they're real people getting bombarded with hate online. Like, you know it's getting bad when TV shows are starting to have to put out little messages like, hate is bad, be kind on social media. Like, it's very much giving when they used to break character at the end of Disney Channel episodes to talk about a serious subject, like, don't be a bully. But for real, like, that's embarrassing, especially for adult shows. It's like such a bad look for fans. I mean, that should not be necessary. Like, most recently, I just saw like The Summer I Turned Pretty, that show, they just put out a statement and had to say it. And the new season hasn't even come out yet. Like, they did it in advance. Like, they already know what's coming. Like, I don't know what goes on over there. I don't watch that show, but I was really like, really? Like, is it that bad? Somebody please tell me what's going on with that. Another form of projection is when fans take lyrics or interviews and treat them as direct commentary on someone's real life relationships, then go after whoever they think the villain is. We've seen this a lot with Taylor Swift's exes. I mean, Jake Gyllenhaal, John Mayer, Joe Jonas. Fans went after them because of what they believed was being said in the music. Same with Olivia Rodrigo, Sabrina Carpenter, and Joshua Bassett. And it's like, yes, some lyrics do come from real experiences, but sometimes they're exaggerated, sometimes they're fictionalized, or even about somebody else entirely. And even if they are real, that still doesn't give an excuse to harass strangers over something that you don't even know the full story behind. Like, that's not right either. But I do have to say, and this goes back to parasocial relationships too, I feel like people always talk about the fans and like to ignore that celebrities benefit a lot from having these parasocial relationships, because sometimes celebrities will use fan dedication to solve their issues or when they need public support. Celebrities will often weaponize their fans in this same way. Fans mobilizing to protect their faves is not anything new, but social media has made it way more direct. Here's a few ways this may play out. You've probably seen examples of several of these. Celebrities may tag brands, labels, or industry figures who wronged them, knowing their fan base will apply pressure. Artists will use their fan base to pressure labels, streaming services, or event organizers. If a tour date is canceled or something is wrong, they will hint at mistreatment, and fans will immediately start demanding answers. Some celebrities will quote tweet articles or call out journalists who gave their music a bad review, knowing their fans will swarm the writer. And this can discourage negative press coverage because no one wants to deal with mass harassment. If a celebrity gets backlash, they can frame it as an attack, knowing their fan base will jump in to defend them, often harassing critics or journalists in the process. Even if the celeb doesn't directly tell fans to attack, they know that's how it's going to play out. And so my message is to the fans, simply do not fall for that. Do not go online harassing people. Don't play into that, honestly. And also, again, it's stuff like this that makes fandom so complicated. Some fans project too much onto artists, expecting constant access, but some celebrities also benefit from a system where they want fans to care deeply, invest emotionally, and rally for them online, but only on these types of terms. And all of this starts to lead us into something even trickier. It's time to talk about entitlement. First, let's start by defining entitlement. It's usually when a fan starts to believe they deserve something from an artist, whether it's access, a response, an explanation, whatever it may be. Personally, I think my definition is a bit narrower than what I see people kind of throw around the term for online. It's kind of like parasocial relationships. People use it to kind of use it as an insult, even though pretty much everything about being a fan is parasocial, even most of the people using the term in a bad context. I kind of see entitlement used in the same way. And so, what I mean by that is, in my definition, in my opinion, there are some things people may call entitled that don't really feel that way to me. Take parasocial relationships, for example. We just talked about how fans can feel a closeness to artists. That might lead to someone wanting to meet their favorite singer or actor. But is that automatically entitled? I don't think so. I think it's only entitled when you feel owed that moment. There's a difference between hoping something happens and expecting it to. And honestly, most of your favorite artists were fans once too. Every actor, every musician, every public figure, they had idols before they were famous. They know what that admiration feels like. Like, I've seen so many interviews of celebrities talking about how they've been like fangirling out to meet another celebrity, how surreal it was to be invited backstage by a legend they grew up admiring. Good art inspires people, and I think that's a really special, important thing. So I think that part of it is completely normal, and I don't think it's wrong to dream about having a conversation with someone you admire, but pushing that dream onto someone else, that's where it's an issue. And so I always see people say like all of it is entitled, but I only think it's like expecting it that's entitled. Like for me, yes, I'd love to meet Harry Styles, but do I expect to? Not really. If I ever actually saw him on the street, I'd probably walk the other way. That's just who I am. But for fans who would approach, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just saying, don't expect anything in return. And honestly, meeting celebrities is kind of trivial in the bigger picture. What I really want to talk about are the other ways that entitlement shows up, especially when it starts to blur how we view the roles of our favorite artists. What I mean by that is I often see people discussing in entitlement conversations what is owed and what is not owed and what's part of the job versus not. And I think it's really interesting because I view it in kind of a way where most celebrities have two jobs. There's the job an artist signs up for, like being a musician, actor, athlete, whatever it is. And then there's the job of being famous, which nobody really signs up for, but it's kind of like a given, a side effect. You can be a musician, sure, but if you want to be a pop star, you want to be on world tours and winning Grammys, you have to deal with fame. The two go hand in hand, whether you like it or not. And I'm not saying that to glorify fame. I think the entire system around celebrity needs to be rethought. But the reality is, right now, as it stands, you can't have the spotlight without being seen, without being known, without being famous. So I think there's two types of entitlement. There's entitlement tied to someone's craft, that job, like expecting a musician to perform if you bought a ticket. And then there's entitlement tied to their fame, like expecting access to their personal life or presence at something like a stage door or meeting them on the street. One is about the job and the other is about who they are to you. And you can clock out of being a musician, but you can't clock out of fame traditionally. People will always know and recognize you, and that is constant whether on stage or not. That's the tricky, dark side of fame. But again, they didn't sign up for that part. So any general expectations that may exist in that world of it, technically, they shouldn't be expectations. Their role as a singer or actress or whatever, that is what they signed up for. And I do think there's room for fair expectations in those spaces when it comes to fulfilling their professional commitments, like performing at a show or releasing music as promised. There is an expectation that's part of the job. Like Broadway, for example. We talked about this before. A performer's job is to be on stage during their contracted performances. Stage touring, that's not technically part of the job description. It's a bonus. It's a part of the fame job, if you will. Similarly, when fans spend money on tickets, travel, or accommodations to see a music artist, they have a valid expectation that the artist will take the stage. That's their job. Of course, artists are human. Things happen, illness, mental health struggles, logistical challenges, and fans do need to express empathy. But that doesn't mean fans are wrong to feel disappointment when commitments aren't met. The key is striking a balance, understanding the professional obligations of artists while also recognizing their humanity. For example, last year when Chappell Roan canceled her performances at All Things Go last year, I completely understood and even admired her choice to prioritize her mental health in an industry that constantly pushes you to never stop. But that doesn't mean that the fans who were upset were being unreasonable. They had an expectation, one rooted in professional commitment, one rooted in her actual job to be a performer. A canceled show affects more than just their emotions. It affects their wallets, their time, and their trust. Them being disappointed isn't entitlement, it's just real life. So that goes back to like what I was saying at the beginning when I was saying that sometimes my definition of entitlement does not extend to what I see some people say online, because I saw a lot of people saying when she canceled, like, oh, she doesn't owe you anything. Like, her job is to be a musician. That kind of is in the contract that you're expecting to see her perform at something that she signed up to be at performing. But again, empathy also exists because there are things that can change. There are things that can happen. But if you're going to expect anything from a musician who is billed on a music festival, you're going to expect that they perform. That's the only thing you're supposed to expect. So something like that, when fans are disappointed, I do not see that as entitlement. Other people might disagree, but that's just me. And to me, the problem is just that social media often paints these situations in black and white, because you're either a good fan who says nothing or a bad fan for expressing disappointment. But the reality is more nuanced. Fans can be disappointed while still respecting the artist's humanity, and artists can acknowledge their commitments without compromising their boundaries and mental health. It's also easy to assume that every boundary pushing moment is a fan problem. But honestly, a lot of these problems that we're seeing today, it's also just internet culture, it's generational problems, it's society problems that kind of get thrown into being a fan issue. Like, yeah, if you're DMing an artist 10 times begging for a reply, that's fan entitlement. But if you're commenting story time on a vague post from someone you don't even follow, that's just online nosiness. Like, it's not always that deep. And I feel like the internet makes us feel like we have unlimited access to everyone. Celebrities, influencers, or even random people who went viral. So some fans are definitely part of that culture, but some aren't. And sometimes it's not even just fans, it's just bored people scrolling online, like TikTok. Like, I will see it without even celebrities. It'll just be like some random person and they're telling some crazy story, like with zero context of like, I broke my arm on a moon bounce. And the people in the comments are like, story time. Like, people are just nosy. That's not always like a fan thing. Like, that's just people. And I'm not one to like do that. I'm just like pointing out the difference in things. I guess my bottom line is that not every fan is entitled just because they engage. The real issue is when boundaries are ignored after they've been set. And so I think that's where I personally draw the line at. There's this really fine line between being a fan who engages and being a fan who expects something in return. And that's where this whole conversation gets complicated, because it's like, where should that expectation actually begin? If you tag a celebrity in a post, are you demanding a response or are you just sharing your excitement? We've seen actors jump into memes on TikTok about their old movies. Sometimes they respond, sometimes they don't, and that's fine. I don't think tagging them is a problem. The problem is when they say please stop and people don't. You're not entitled to their time or their participation in a joke or anything like that. They can say no and that should be the end of it. So I think we need to separate the want from the expectation, because wanting a moment can be human. Expecting, demanding, pushing for it after you've been told no, that's where I personally define entitlement to actually begin. That's when it goes from being human to ignoring the humanity of someone else. So now that we've talked about what fan entitlement is in my personal definition, and more importantly, what it isn't in my eyes, let's get into how it forms. Because fans don't just wake up one day and decide to feel owed something. There are a lot of cultural and industry dynamics at play behind the scenes. First of all, we have to acknowledge that celebrities don't exist on the same social plane as the rest of us, and they never really have. Whether it's money, access, security, or lifestyle, there's always going to be a gap between the famous person and the fan, and that's something that I also kind of get a little nitpicky about how I speak nuanced about it. Is because people will say celebrities are normal people, but I feel like they're human beings is the better word, because we're all humans and that's what we should live by. But I don't think they typically operate like normal people. I mean, They have a higher level of class. They have, even just down to like the downsides of it, they have all eyes on them all the time. That's not a normal people thing. So I honestly think that gap gets talked about in a weird way. People are always saying fans put celebrities on pedestals, but I don't think it's just the fans doing that, because celebrity culture requires that pedestal. It requires them to not be seen as normal people. It doesn't work without it. That distance, that feeling of exclusivity, it's baked into the entire system, because if a celebrity doesn't feel elevated from the rest of us, untouchable, larger than life, then what makes them a celebrity at all? But the problem is they're also constantly trying to be seen as the opposite. I mean, a lot of celebrities, yes, they're distant, but they're also trying to be relatable. They're aspirational, but they're also trying to be just like us. They're everywhere, but they're still somehow above everything. It's a contradiction, and I think because of that contradiction, a lot of people forget that gap is even there, especially when curated access is so good at making people feel like it's not. I think if more people did recognize and just see it as face value that celebrities exist in a completely different social class, I think we'd see less entitlement. But a lot of fans don't want to look at it that way, because at the end of the day, celebrities aren't treating fans like friends or equals. They're treating them like fans. And that's not an issue. That's just the reality of celebrity culture. That's how it works. But again, fans don't want to look at it that way. They want to look at it like we're all in the same team, you know? And so that makes them think that like, oh, we're all in the same team. We're all in the same level. Like I can go up to them like I go up to anybody else on the street. And the reality is they are still above us in their own little social class divide. And that brings us to something I think is really important in this conversation, because not all celebrities are treated the same. Fan entitlement also doesn't hit everyone equally. Some artists are expected to engage constantly, while others are allowed to keep their distance. And a lot of that comes down to who they are and how they're positioned in the industry. Age, gender, genre, career stage, I feel like it all plays a role, and we see different things in each of those. For example, a veteran actor in his 60s isn't facing the same intensity as a 22-year-old pop star just getting her start. It's not about talent, it's about accessibility and aesthetic. And honestly, it's about who people feel comfortable crossing lines with. Look at someone like Beyonce. Fans will absolutely show up, scream outside buildings, and try to get her attention, but I feel like people are not expecting Beyonce to stop. She's built a brand around mystique, that elevated, untouchable energy. So when fans do show up, they're not shocked when she keeps walking. She's been in the game long enough that distance is just part of her brand. She doesn't offer access. She doesn't offer anybody insight into her life. She doesn't need to. She's established, and so people don't expect it. She did an interview last year with GQ, and she actually said, in quote, "One thing I've worked extremely hard on is making sure my kids can have as much normalcy and privacy as possible, ensuring my personal life isn't turned into a brand. It's very easy for celebrities to turn our lives into performance art. I have made an extreme effort to stay true to my boundaries and protect myself and my family. No amount of money is worth my peace." And I just love that she said that. I really respect that, especially that line about like her personal life being turned into a brand, because I think so many celebrities just do that. They just allow that, even though it comes with so many downsides. And I think that's so important. And I'll get into this more in our finale episode, because if you can't tell by like my tone and my opinions, like I really just don't understand like why, as she said, celebrities have to turn their lives into this performance art. Like, why do we need all of this extra stuff? We really don't. The art should be enough. And so it's like a slippery slope, both for celebrities with fans getting too caught up in these parasocial relationships because so much is given when it doesn't need to be. And so I think that's just something really important to think about. But going back to ideas with entitlement with younger pop stars, especially women, the expectation seems to be different. There's almost this unspoken idea that earlier in your career, you're supposed to be grateful for the support, grateful for the attention, grateful enough to engage and post and respond and stop on the street and do everything. Like fan engagement is this rite of passage that you have to pass in order to be seen as worthy of success. So when someone like Chappell Roan sets a firm boundary, it sparks controversy. Not because she's wrong for doing it necessarily, but because people aren't used to it, because there's this unspoken idea that newer artists, especially women, need to be more available because they haven't earned that distance yet. There's this narrative of we helped build you, so where's our thank you, whether it be through replies on social media or just even seeming approachable. Fans expect a certain level of access from newer artists, and when they don't get it, that's when the entitlement starts to bubble up. Meanwhile, you look at artists like Taylor Swift, low-key the queen of parasocialism with her fans. She spent years fostering very, very intense connections with her fans, and I'm talking even down to inviting them to her home. It shows there's really a spectrum of things and how we get to this point where it seems like it's so expected. And I think it's because so many artists do stuff like this, whether it's because they want to or whether it's because even the industry sees it as a valuable part because they see fan dedication as something so important that they want their artists to put all of their time into engaging with their fans. So it's almost like a shock when somebody doesn't. But whatever it be, it shows that there really is a spectrum. And we even see with going back to Taylor Swift, she has started to pull back significantly. And she has some of the most entitled fans out there, unfortunately. And I think that's just because of all of the years that she built a closeness, a girl next door, best friend type of energy with her fans. And that just does not go away. And it also leads to entitlement and expectation for other artists to reach the level that she has in her relationship with her fans. I also think that social media can lead to way more entitlement. And I know we've said a million times over and over again how that brings a sense of perceived closeness, but also like social media just makes people feel more comfortable than they ever would be in real life. Like there's just an anonymous factor that makes people feel bolder, whether that's through trolling, being unfiltered, or saying something you'd never actually say to someone's face. And again, that's one of those things that's also just like not just a fan problem, that's like a cultural problem, an internet problem, but I'm just saying it here as well because that has to do with like the fact that like we see it in fan spaces as well. Also, we talked a little bit about this back in our parasocial relationships episode. The idea that sometimes artists do remember fans or acknowledge them in meaningful, positive ways, and how sometimes that leads to fans acting out more because they also want to be recognized or remembered. But one example that comes to mind that I kind of just want to throw in there is like something that's also a little bit different that we're seeing. There's this one popular TikToker who originally went viral by approaching random celebrities unprovoked on the street. Sometimes outside venues, other times while they were eating, working, or clearly trying to have a private moment. And while some of the videos that this TikToker put out, they were funny or entertaining, there were also instances where it was clear the celebrity was uncomfortable or didn't want to engage, or that he was waiting outside of some sort of place for them to come out. And what's fascinating and complicated is that this behavior, which many would call invasive for most fans to do, ultimately led for him to brand deals, collaborations, and even more staged videos with celebrities themselves. So even though this creator started out by blurring boundaries, they're now being celebrated and invited into the industry. And that's where the contradiction really shows itself. Some of the same artists who have actively voiced frustration about fans crossing personal boundaries in real life are now collaborating with someone who built their platform by doing exactly that. So it raises a real question. Was the issue ever truly the behavior, or was it the status of the person doing it? Because if it was a random fan, it's invasive. But if it's someone with followers, an audience, a brand value, suddenly it becomes content. And I don't say that to criticize any one artist or creator, and that's why I'm not even going to say who it is, although it's pretty obvious who it is, but to highlight how fandom dynamics shift when power and popularity get involved as well. The rules don't always apply equally, and I don't condone waiting outside or stopping a celebrity on the street like that. It's just an example, and I think that fans feel those types of examples and see those things, even if it's unspoken. And so I'm not saying this to take away from the creator's success or call them out or anything, but ultimately my point is here that when stories like his go viral, when we see fans being granted access going from being just a fan to someone who's recognized, because I've seen it happen even with people that didn't cross clear boundaries, and I've seen like the comments be filled with like, you've literally like lived my dream fangirl life. You're living out all our dreams. You've gone from being just like chronically online like the rest of us to hanging out with our favorite celebrities. And like you literally see in the comments people aspiring to be exactly like them. And so when you also see it happening with people crossing boundaries, it's like, is this leading to entitlement too? Or more people trying to duplicate what this TikToker did? And so it's like when somebody goes from that, like it's like, what message does that send? Even though I think it's a smaller part of what's also starting to fuel a growing sense of entitlement in fandom, it's something worth paying attention to Because as we talked about before with repetition, it's like if someone else got close, then it's becoming natural for others to think, why not me? If they literally crossed boundaries and still got rewarded, what's stopping others from trying the same? And that's where things can get dangerous. Again, that's why we see fans throwing things on stage, because somebody was appreciated by the artist for doing it. Somebody got viral on TikTok for doing it. And so more people are doing that thing. And so I just wanted to point that out as another dangerous example in all of the TikTok and social media trends that might be leading to some of this too, especially when you start to see the celebrities and the artists kind of reciprocate and play into that too. And then another thing that we could probably do a whole semester on just like investigating and looking at is the regular media. That's a huge thing that can lead to entitlement, because the media can be extremely entitled too. It's like even when artists do try to draw boundaries, the media often runs right through them. Paparazzi photos, speculative headlines, deep dive interviews that ask questions meant to draw controversy or go viral. It's not always the team behind the celebrities doing parasocial marketing. Sometimes it's the machine around the artist that's completely outside of their control doing the damage too. So we've talked about what fan entitlement is and some ways that it can form. But what happens when that entitlement isn't just something that fans feel, but something that they act on? Let's get into the consequences of this, because it doesn't stop at unrealistic expectations. Sometimes it leads to harassment. For example, look at the Star Wars franchise. When Kelly Marie Tran was cast as Rose in The Last Jedi, she became the target of a horrifying racist hate campaign. Same with John Boyega. These fans weren't just upset about the characters or the storyline. They used that as an excuse to harass, bully, and try to push these actors out of the spotlight. Kelly Marie Tran ended up having to leave social media entirely, and it wasn't just online drama. It had a real effect on her mental health and public image. We even see it with smaller things, like more recently musician Dora Jar. She was set to open up for Gracie Abrams, but she faced a petition from fans who said they just didn't want her to be on the tour. A petition, like she was doing something wrong just by being picked. I mean, that's crazy entitlement to think that as a fan, you can even choose the opening act that an artist puts out. And I think lately fans are using their opinions and trying to make actions based on what they want. It's one thing to have an opinion or thought or something, and then it's another thing to take it to the creative team or the artist and try to tell them they did it wrong because it's not how you would do it. Like, that's insane entitlement. And it's also hurtful. Like, I remember seeing Dora Jar, she posted about it and she was joking about it, but you can also tell like that's something that affects you. It's not really a nice thing to do. And I remember that happened recently too with like Outer Banks and people getting mad that they killed off JJ. I hope that's not a spoiler. It's been like several months. But anyways, they were literally starting petitions to cancel the entire show. Like, that is crazy. At least put trust into the creators, even if it's not how you would do it. Just like let them be the creators. They're the ones with the control of doing the art. These TV shows are not like a choose your own adventure where you pick the ending yourself. You just got to watch it. And if you don't like it, then stop watching it. There's a lot of other really, really harmful things that entitlement leads to. And we talked about some of the really, really bad ones in our parasocial relationship episode and how many of those things tend to be more rare beyond harassment, like real life attacks and stuff like that. That's a lot more rare, but those do exist as well. But I want to talk about some other types of entitlement that are a little bit more subtle, but just as damaging. And that would be the constant demand for output. I use Taylor Swift a lot for my examples, but I mean, it's so easy too. So much of this just has to do with her fandom and also just like what we're seeing. She's one of the biggest pop stars. So if it's happening to her, like it's happening to a lot of artists too. And I think it's just that like with Taylor Swift, people just expect way too much from her. And I'm going to say this is no hate, not trying to make this a hierarchy of who's been a fan longer or whatever, because I know I called that out weeks ago. So don't call me a hypocrite for saying this, but I honestly have a reason to say it. And it's like I feel like it's the new Swifties who expect way too much and it's almost always exclusively the new fans. And I only say that because I feel like the past few years, if you became a fan of Taylor Swift, the only thing that you really know is constant output Taylor Swift. Like for the past 4 or 5 years, she has just been going, throwing stuff out there around the clock. The newer fans just don't know what it's like to wait years for an album or for her to completely disappear off the grid. So it leads to this constant theorizing of what's next, what's this, what's that. And they feed into it so much because a lot of the time they have been right. That's the crazy thing. I think to myself, there's no way that she's releasing another album. She just did this re-recording or something, and everyone is theorizing and begging for it and being like, this is actually a double album, or she's going to announce this at the Grammys, and then she does it. And it's like, oh, well, I stand corrected. And so that's why I say the newer Swifties have not been proven wrong enough, and they've only gotten constant access. And so that's why I say it. And I feel like they're just so loud now. But sometimes I just have to say it is a little bit annoying because everything is not an Easter egg or a teaser or a clue for something. I'll never forget. I never really stayed up and watched the Eras Tour live streams, but I did stay up for the final show. And when it happened, I was just like appalled, like completely disgusted. Not to be dramatic, but just the intensity of disappointment from so many people because she didn't announce Reputation, Taylor's version, or Debut, which neither of those are even coming anymore. But anyways, she wore the same bodysuit all 3 nights. She didn't switch up anything new, or she didn't do an encore or bring out special guests or whatever. And it's like, why is the normal Eras Tour show not enough? It was a 3-hour show. It was incredible. I was blown away. I went twice. She doesn't have to do something revolutionary for it to be a show that matters. So I was just shocked that people in the comments and in Facebook groups that I was in and on TikTok, they were saying, oh, the final show was boring. It was a disappointment. She could have done this. She could have done that. They had even been starting rumors and fully believed that she had extended the show by an extra hour for the final night. I mean, she just performed 3 hours. This is a history-making show. Just with the 3 hours. You're saying it's underwhelming because you set the bar too high, not because she didn't do everything she was supposed to do. I feel like these newer Swifties are conditioned to coming up with these crazy theories and then being rewarded by being right, which it's hilarious. But then what happens when it doesn't happen? What happens when the theorizing goes too far? Like, also, we shouldn't, as I was saying earlier, be speculating about her personal life and whether Travis Kelce is going to propose. Like, it's just getting to be a little bit much from what I've seen. It's like, if you want to believe the fact that Taylor posted a photo upside down and that means TS14 is coming, by all means, go ahead. Stuff like that. Have fun. Whatever. It's usually harmless. But don't get mad if it doesn't happen. And then have the nerve to be like, I wish Taylor or whoever interacted with us online more. Like, why? And then, of course, Taylor Swift is not the only artist that deals with stuff like that. I mean, Billie Eilish is an artist that's talked about this too, how fans keep asking her for new music constantly while also criticizing every change she makes in her style or sound. I mean, at the end of her last album, Hit Me Hard and Soft, it literally ends. The last thing that she says on the track is her mocking this idea and going, but when can I hear the next one? Because as soon as the album ends, it comes out, fans are already harboring around her to release the next album. And it's like, that album is great. Like, it's still on heavy rotation. It's been over a year. I don't even need her to release anything else. I'm still enjoying that. And so it's like when fans put that pressure on artists, it's like the reality is the constant output is not the norm. It's the exception. I mean, I'm saying this as someone who grew up a big One Direction fan. They literally crashed and burned. They went album, tour, album, tour, album, tour, no break. 5 albums, 6 tours in 4 years. Like, that is not normal. Shawn Mendes, he had to take a break to focus on his mental health. He literally said the pressure was too much. And honestly, how could it not be? We see it all the time. An artist drops a project and the next day people are in the comments like, when's the next one? When's the tour? Where's the visuals? Like, Justin Bieber just announced a surprise album and people keep saying all this stuff about a tour. And it's like, I have zero expectations for a tour for that album. I mean, I will be happy if we get it, but I'm like, you guys, really? Like, I don't even expect it. And again, I get it. When you love someone's work, you want more of it, but art takes time. Like, you've got to remember that. Life takes time. If you actually want them to make something that is good, that's not just chasing trends, that's actually representative of who they are and the type of sound they want, you have to let them live a little, let them breathe, let them fail or experiment or go silent for a while. Because if they're just creating to meet demand, they're not going to give you their best. And so I think that's something that's really important for fans to constantly keep in mind. Like, Harry Styles is one of my favorite artists. He's been gone for what? He hasn't released an album in like 3 years now, and I'm fine. Like, I'm chilling, you know, because he's also not the only artist that I listen to. I mean, I've got plenty of other artists to keep me engaged and interested, and then we also still have like 3 albums by him, and it's like fans are constantly like HS4 at midnight, HS4 at midnight, constantly getting disappointed, and it's like, you know, like, I'm sure he's cooking in the studio. Like, when he comes, it's going to be good. because it's taking time, and that's fine. So our lesson today, ultimately, I don't think conversations about entitlement or projection or cancel culture or anything should be specifically about demonizing fans or overly defending celebrities or the other way around. I mean, it's about humanity at the end of the day. Fans are human, they feel deeply, they form attachments, they show up, and celebrities are human too. Even when they create characters or share parts of themselves publicly, they are allowed to draw the line. And yes, that line can become harder to see when connection becomes currency and when vulnerability is part of their brand. So we end up stuck in this strange cycle where fans are told not to get too close while being handed everything they need to feel connected. Artists are expected to be open, but only in a way that doesn't make anyone uncomfortable. So maybe at the end of the day, the issue with all of this isn't about just access. Maybe it's about how we've all been conditioned by the industry, by algorithms, by expectations to confuse performance with presence and connection with consent. And maybe the way forward starts with remembering that both sides are just people trying to make sense of an industry, a world where it was never designed to be simple. These days, competing in fandom isn't just about who gets front row or who owns the most merch, as we talked about last week. Sometimes it's also about who behaves the best. And I've seen this a lot online lately. Someone will make a TikTok or a Reddit post about stage dooring or concert etiquette or parasocial boundaries, and the comments will immediately fill with things like, "That's why I just go home after the show. I never wait at the stage door. I don't even get why people do that. I'm not one of those fans." And sometimes, yeah, that's just someone sharing a personal preference. But a lot of the time, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like posturing, like people are rushing to the comments to prove that they're the good kind of fan, the respectful kind, the one that the artist would approve of. And that makes sense because we're in this moment where proximity to the artist equals status. And what better way to earn proximity than to say, "Hey, I'm on your side. I don't cross lines. I'm not like the rest." But at a certain point, it stops being about values and it starts being about virtue signaling. When we talk about parasocial relationships or even just being a fan, it's easy to default to these types of blames. The celebrity is being fake, the fan is being delusional, the media is stirring the pot. But the truth is, there's no single villain here, and there's no perfect group either. There's no one person or group to point at and say, "You're the problem." The real issue is the system and the dynamics. The fact that the industry trains or requires artists to share so much to feel relatable, but not so much that it erases the pedestal. And artists, they're rewarded for being real, building intimacy and letting us in. And fans, they're rewarded for being loyal, for paying attention, and for caring. So if a fan ends up emotionally invested in someone who's never met them, that's not really a character flaw, that's by design. But we can't stop the conversation there, because fans do have responsibility too. It's on fans to recognize when our care turns into obsession, when admiration turns into expectation, and when that support turns into some of those entitlement things that we talked about today. It's on the fans to ask, am I watching because I love the art or because I feel owed something in return? Do I feel disappointed when a celebrity doesn't acknowledge me, and why is that? Have I mistaken their curated vulnerability for personal access? When we name these dynamics, all of them, we start to see the fuller picture. The celebrity isn't just a person, they're a brand. The fan isn't just a customer, they're a believer. And the connection between them, it's commercial, it's complicated. So there's no easy answer to whose fault is it. There's no real fault here at all. That's not really the question. The question is, what do we do with this knowledge? What boundaries do we set, not just for celebrities, but for ourselves as fans? What does it look like to love something without losing ourselves in it? What does it look like to be invested but not consumed? Because fandom should be an addition to your life, not a replacement for it. You shouldn't feel like you're entitled or even need to be entitled to anything from this world, because it should only give, not take. Now, I know this episode didn't cover everything, and I kind of rambled off a little bit at times. I mean, I was a little all over the place, but these 3 topics alone could be discussed for hours. There's so much more to say and so many angles we didn't get to, but that just means this won't be the last time I explore fan culture in some way or another. We'll come back to it for sure. But for now, that brings us to the end of this little reflection. We've made it to the end of the semester. Next episode is our final exam, but don't worry, it's not a test, it's just a wrap up. A reflection on everything we've talked about this season, from concert etiquette and parasocial dynamics to fandom spending and online discourse, and where I see things headed for fandom culture as a whole. Plus, I'll give a little peek into my own experience as a fan and what this podcasting journey has meant to me personally. So stay tuned and don't drop this class just yet. We've got one more lesson left. Thanks for attending class at the School of Pop. If you enjoyed this session, please complete a course evaluation by leaving a 5-star review and share the show with a friend for extra credit. Make sure you're subscribed to School of Pop on Substack so you can get your class notes and review what we discussed today, including your homework, aka the list of references and recommendations I gave throughout this episode. That's at schoolofpop.substack.com. You can also show your school spirit by following along on Instagram at School of Pop HQ. For more pop culture fun, follow at Fave Media, the home of School of Pop, the Pop Recap newsletter, and so much more. See you in class next week.
This has been a Fave Media production.